There is a moment that happens in almost every woman's life, and she rarely talks about it, because it doesn't feel like something worth mentioning. It's the moment she thinks about a man she barely spoke to, not the one who texted her every day, not the one who complimented her the most, or showed up the most, or tried the hardest, the one who didn't, the one who was calm, who was fine either way, who never once made her feel like she had the upper hand. She doesn't remember what he said. She remembers how he made her feel unfinished, and that feeling never really leaves. If you've ever wondered why the men who try the least seem to be remembered the most, this is the video that explains it, using actual psychology, not pickup lines, not tricks, not manipulation. Because there's a difference between disappearing to play a game and disappearing because you genuinely have a life that doesn't revolve around anyone. Only one of those is remembered fondly. The other one is remembered as a red flag. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly which one you are and exactly what to change if you're not where you want to be. Let's start with the lie almost every man is taught. The lie is that love is won through effort, that if you just message enough, show up enough, compliment enough, eventually the scale tips in your favor. And look, effort matters. Nobody is saying be cold, be distant, be a ghost. But there's a version of effort that reads as devotion, and there's a version that reads as desperation. And the line between them is thinner than most men realize, and most men cross it without knowing. Here's what almost nobody tells you. Attention that is freely and constantly given loses its value the moment it's guaranteed. This isn't opinion. This is basic behavioral psychology. Anything unlimited becomes invisible. Air is unlimited, so you don't think about it until it's gone. A text that arrives every single morning without fail becomes wallpaper. It stops being a signal of interest and starts being background noise. And once someone becomes background noise in your life, you stop noticing when they leave. Now flip it. A man who doesn't chase isn't withholding as a strategy. He's simply not available on demand because his life doesn't orbit around being available. And that unpredictability, that space where she doesn't know exactly what he's thinking or when she'll hear from him again, activates something in the brain called the Zeigarnik effect. It's a well-documented psychological pattern where unfinished, unresolved experiences occupy far more mental space than completed ones. A conversation that ends cleanly, with nothing left hanging, gets filed away and forgotten. A conversation that ends with a small trace of uncertainty, a man who was warm but not fully knowable, gets replayed. Her brain keeps returning to it because it never got closure. That is not manipulation. That is just how human memory prioritizes information. And men who don't chase benefit from it without even trying, because their calm is genuine, not performed. Let's talk about why the calm is genuine. Because this is where most men get it backwards. They think the goal is to fake indifference, to play it cool on purpose, while secretly refreshing their phone every 4 minutes, hoping she texted back. That's not detachment. That's anxiety wearing a costume. And people can feel the difference, even if they can't explain it. There's a kind of nervous energy underneath performed indifference that leaks out anyway, through response time, through tone, through how quickly the mask drops the second she gives him a little attention back. Real detachment doesn't come from a technique, it comes from a life. A man who has built something, goals he's actually working toward, friendships he actually shows up for, standards he actually holds, discipline he actually practices. That man isn't calm because he's trying to be. He's calm because his sense of worth was settled before she ever walked into the room. Her interest is a nice addition to his life. It was never the foundation of it. And that distinction changes everything about how he shows up, because a man whose identity depends on being chosen will always eventually reveal that dependence, no matter how well he thinks he's hiding it. So here is the first real psychological reason women remember the men who don't chase. It's called the scarcity heuristic, and it is one of the oldest, most reliable patterns in human decision-making. Our brains are wired to assign more value to things that are limited, and less value to things that are abundant, regardless of the actual quality of the thing itself. This is why a limited edition version of an ordinary product suddenly feels special. This is why a job opening with 200 applicants feels more prestigious than one with 2. It's not logical. It's automatic. And a man who is visibly, constantly available, whose time and attention can be accessed at any hour with no resistance, is unconsciously coded by the brain as low value, even if he's an incredible person. Not because he is low value, because scarcity is the brain's shortcut for worth, and abundance breaks that shortcut every time. The second reason is what psychologists call the effort justification effect. People assign more value to things they had to work for. This has been shown again and again. Initiation rituals that are harder to get through make people value the group more once they're in. Furniture you assemble yourself feels more valuable than furniture that arrives built. And relationships work the same way emotionally. If a woman never has to wonder, never has to invest curiosity, never has to reach a little to understand a man, her brain never assigns the relationship real weight. But when there's a small gap, when he's warm but not fully unlocked, when getting his attention requires a bit of genuine reciprocity rather than an act of persistence, her mind attaches more value to closing that gap. This is why men who don't chase are remembered as significant, and men who chase relentlessly are remembered as needy, even when the second man technically showed more affection. The third reason is identity protection, and this one is subtle. When a man chases hard and eventually gets rejected or ignored, something interesting happens to how she remembers him. She starts remembering him through the lens of his desperation, not his character. His personality gets buried under the memory of him trying too hard. But a man who never chased, who maintained his own direction the entire time, gets remembered as himself. His identity stays intact in her memory because he never contorted it trying to win her over. People don't fall for personalities they can't clearly see, and chasing, ironically, blurs the very personality that made someone attractive in the first place. The fourth reason is what's called the peak end rule. This is a well-studied idea in memory research. We don't remember experiences by averaging every moment of them. We remember them by their most intense point, and by how they ended. A man who chases and eventually fades out because he gave up or got tired usually ends that story on a low note, a slow, awkward fade, sometimes even bitterness. A man who never overextended himself in the first place has nowhere to fade from. There was never a peak of desperation to come down from. His story stays level, calm, and dignified from beginning to end, and that's the version her memory holds on to. The fifth reason is rarer, and it's the one most men never even consider. It's called the mere exposure paradox. Normally, familiarity increases liking. The more you're around something, the more comfortable and fond of it you become. That's why chasing seems logical on paper. More contact should mean more attachment. But this only holds true when the exposure feels chosen and voluntary from both sides. When one person is the one doing all the reaching, the exposure stops feeling mutual, and it starts feeling like pressure. And pressure doesn't build fondness, it builds avoidance. The brain starts associating that person's presence with a subtle demand, being needed, being chased, being expected to respond, and avoidance of a demand, even a soft one, quietly overrides the normal liking that familiarity should produce. Now here's where this gets important, because I don't want you walking away from this video thinking the lesson is manipulation, or games, or pretending not to care. None of what I just explained works as a technique. The moment you try to perform detachment while secretly chasing underneath, all 5 of these effects collapse, because they all depend on the detachment being real. So let's talk about how it actually becomes real, because that's the only part of this that matters. It starts with where your validation comes from. If your sense of worth rises and falls based on whether someone texts you back, you will always eventually chase, no matter how much psychology you learn, because the anxiety underneath will win. The fix isn't a trick. It's building a life substantial enough that no single person's attention can tip it over. That means having your own goals that actually excite you, ones that exist completely independent of anyone's approval. It means having friendships and community that don't depend on romantic interest to feel full. It means having standards you actually enforce, not just talk about, so that disrespect gets addressed, instead of quietly tolerated out of fear of losing someone. It also means learning the difference between pursuing and chasing, because those are not the same thing, and confusing them is where most men go wrong in both directions. Pursuing is making a clear, confident move and then respecting the response. Chasing is refusing to accept the response and continuing to push, continuing to explain yourself, continuing to try to convince someone into wanting you. Confident men pursue plenty. They ask her out. They plan the date. They text first sometimes. They're not scared of initiating. What they don't do is override a lukewarm response with more effort. If interest isn't returned in some form, they don't escalate. They simply direct their energy elsewhere, not out of spite, but because they understand that mutual interest can't be manufactured through persistence. There's also a boundary piece that almost nobody talks about, which is knowing what you will and won't tolerate before you're in a situation that tests it. Men who don't chase usually aren't improvising their standards in the moment. They already know that inconsistent attention, disappearing for days and reappearing like nothing happened, or being treated as an option instead of a priority, isn't something they're willing to accept long-term. And because they know this in advance, they don't need to talk themselves into walking away when it happens. They already decided, I want to be direct about something else too, because it matters. None of this means coldness. None of this means becoming unavailable as a personality trait or treating warmth like a weakness. The men who are remembered aren't cold. They're warm, but not desperate. Present, but not consumed. Interested, but not dependent. That combination, warmth without dependency, is genuinely rare, which is exactly why it stands out so sharply in memory. Most people have experienced one or the other, someone who was warm but needy, or someone who was calm but emotionally closed off. The rare version, warm and secure at the same time, is the one that doesn't fade. So if you're watching this and recognizing yourself as the man who chases, who over-explains, who reaches out one more time even when every signal says don't, this isn't a character flaw you're stuck with. It's usually just a validation habit that formed somewhere, and habits can be rebuilt. Start small. The next time you feel the urge to send a third message after 2 went unanswered, redirect that energy into something that's actually yours. A workout, a task on your goals, a conversation with a friend who already values you. Not as a manipulation tactic to make her chase back, as a genuine return to a life that doesn't need her permission to feel good. Because here's the real ending to this. The goal was never to become unreachable, or to master some algorithm of scarcity to win someone over. The goal is to become a man whose life is already full, so that whoever eventually earns a place in it is met by someone secure, not someone starving for approval dressed up as confidence. When that happens, you stop performing detachment entirely, because it's just who you are. And the strange thing is, that's exactly when people start remembering you. Not because you tried to be unforgettable, because you were finally being yourself, and nobody forgets the version of someone that felt completely, calmly real. If this gave you a different way of thinking about this, there's more where this came from, because understanding how the mind actually works changes more than just relationships. It changes how you carry yourself in every room you walk into.